Welcome to part 4 of the Civil War, America in Conflict. Last time we talked about the election of Abraham Lincoln and how it led to the South seceding, which ultimately would start the Civil War. This time we're going to talk about how the need for shoes might have ended the Civil War. So, lace up those tennis shoes. We're going to go on a marathon of learning. Oh, rest stop. Okay, let's go. Whew. Oh, I'll be there. Okay, I got this. Whew. We last left off at the Battle of the Ironclads and how the iron ships from the North and South would forever change how Navy ships were built across the world. Today we're going to be returning back to land to look at the most influential battle of the war and how the need for shoes may have led to the end of the war. You see, in 1863, the South was actually invading the North to try and bring a quick end to the war. Because of the population, infrastructure, and production advantages the North had over the South, time was on the side of the North. The longer the war went on, the more their advantages would help them win the war. When an army marches into enemy territory, they often pillage or steal supplies from the area they're in. But as I said, some say that General Lee's army was in need of shoes, and he had heard there was a shoe factory in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. He was marching his army to try and take Harrisburg, which you should know is the capital of Pennsylvania. He decided to send a small group of his soldiers off to Gettysburg to see if they could find shoes. While in Gettysburg, Lee's soldiers faced stiff resistance from the Union Army. That General Meade and the Army of the Potomac was waiting to intercept him. As Lee's troops poured into the small town, General Meade, commander of the Union Army, also started moving in more and more Union troops. Meade commanded the Army of the Potomac out of Washington, D.C. Although the meeting of the Confederate and Union armies in Gettysburg had not been planned, they turned out to be one of the most decisive battles of the war. Gettysburg would also turn out to be the battle with the highest number of casualties from both sides. Unfortunately for the South, with a huge disadvantage in population, a large loss would be impossible to come back from. In reality, the losses the South had during Gettysburg would cripple their army, and would be the last time the Confederate Army would threaten the North. The Battle of Gettysburg lasted 3 days, and on day 3 would come the decisive move by General Lee, commander of the Southern Army, in other words, their George Washington. He chose to attack the middle of the Northern line. His plan was to weaken the Northern Army by bombarding them with an artillery attack, and then follow that with a full charge into the center of the Northern line. General George Pickett was ordered to lead his men across the field. As they attacked, line after line of men were gunned down. A few men did reach the line of the Union, but were quickly turned back in a battle that turned into a brutal defeat for Lee and the South. In hindsight, many point to this battle as the one mistake in the otherwise brilliant career of Lee. After the battle, he was forced to retreat and never recovered. The North would be declared the winner of this battle, but would come at a great price for both sides. When the final counts were made, both sides would find they had over 23,000 casualties for a combined total of over 46,000 men killed, wounded, or captured. I'll say that again, 46,000 men killed, wounded, captured, or lost. 5 months later, President Lincoln would arrive and deliver one of the most famous presidential speeches of all time, the Gettysburg Address. The speech, which was only around 2 minutes, was simply meant to honor the fallen, but it also pointed out the importance of the fallen's sacrifice in the fight for the ideals the nation was founded on. Freedom, liberty, the idea that mankind's free will is a God-given right that cannot be and should not be taken away by anyone. 11 months earlier, Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation that declared all slaves in Confederate states free. This proclamation was made without Congress, under the powers of Commander-in-Chief of the military. The results of this proclamation was to discourage European powers from intervening on the South's behalf. The Emancipation Proclamation did this by making this war about slavery, not states' rights, and no European power wanted to be seen helping a nation full of slaveholders. As important as the victory of Gettysburg was, it did not get Lincoln very much respect across the nation. Lee's army did escape after the battle, and it would be 2 years before the war would end. Unfortunately for Lincoln, he faced a re-election in 1 year. In 1863, many people, including Lincoln, thought he would lose the next election. The 9 presidents before him had only served 1 term. Many people believed that was the new normal in America. It wasn't until General Sherman, who was sent by Lincoln to invade the South, captured Atlanta, that the American people were convinced that the North would indeed win the war. Sherman was ordered to wage total war on the South, which meant not just winning battles, but also destroying everything in his path, including railroad lines, which his men would pull up and bend into strange shapes, which would get the nickname Sherman bow ties. With this newfound confidence in their president, in November of 1864, Lincoln would go on to win the re-election, this time winning a majority of the popular vote as well as the Electoral College. 5 months later, Lee's army finally gave up and surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia. Future President General Grant accepted this surrender and was generous in allowing Lee and his men to return home with their horses and arms. This would be seen as the first step in rejoining the North and the South. Grant simply saw it as allowing men to return home with their guns they would need to hunt in order for their families to survive. 3 days later, after Lee's surrender, Lincoln would attend a play at Ford's Theater and would be shot in the back of the head by a Southern sympathizer. John Wilkes Booth, who would, after shooting Lincoln, jump from the theater's balcony and shout, "Sic semper tyrannis," Latin for "thus always to tyrants," and run at the back of the theater, which he performed at as a famous actor in the Capitol, and right away. He would be hunted down 11 days later, killed after being trapped in a tobacco barn and refusing to come out. His last words were, "Tell my mother I died for my country." People across the country were outraged and went into a deep mourning period at the loss of their beloved president. Although some in the South would celebrate Lincoln's death, most saw it as the only excuse the North would need to heap punishments upon them for leaving the nation and causing this most terrible war. The Civil War was a deadly mixture of traditional battlefield tactics meeting new accurate rifles. In the end, over 1 million soldiers and civilians would be killed or wounded, roughly 3% of the population. To put this in perspective, this is over twice the number of Americans killed in World War II. With the Civil War over, the nation faced a new challenge, which was to rebuild and bring the South back into the country without their trusted leader, Abraham Lincoln. So what? Well, after watching this video, you should be able to answer the following questions. Why was the Battle of Gettysburg important? What major mistakes did Lee make at Gettysburg? And what made the difference in the election of 1864? If you got all that, then you learned what you needed to know. Tune in next time for our unit on Reconstruction.